Now, with just over a week to go, the election campaign is becoming increasingly fractious. Policy proposals are still coming in thick and fast. So in the middle of all the heat and the noise, where are the big ideas that will shape not just the next couple of years, but the decades ahead? Well, on the news at 5, we have been inviting influential people from different walks of life to put forward their plans for the future, plans and ideas which aren't necessarily tied to party politics at all. And with me here in the studio this evening, the businessman and entrepreneur, former Dragon's Den star Theo Paphitis, the writer, filmmaker and editor of New Left Review, Tariq, and comedian, actress and campaigner Francesca Martinez. Welcome to all three of you. We've got 12 minutes to find some big ideas. Francesca, I'm going to kick off with you. If you had the chance to put forward one thing that you would say would make a big difference and you could look forward several years, what would it be?
Well, I think at the heart of politics is ideas. And I think our current value system is very dubious. We seem to have adopted GDP as humanity's goal. I'm not sure quite when that was decided. I must have missed that meeting. But I think surely there must be a better goal than corporate growth. And I think we're living in a world now which is the manifestation of that value. And I think there are far better goals that we can adopt.
Such as?
Goals such as happiness, equality, well-being. One of the key problems to me about growth is that we live on a finite planet and it doesn't really take into account that our resources are limited. So this idea we can keep on growing, but science very clearly shows we have to cut our emissions fast. And I think our current economic model is totally incompatible with sustainability, equality and democracy. And right now, in this current election, we're seeing things like free healthcare, welfare, free education being viewed as luxury items that can be discarded, whereas to me, they are the bedrock of a civilised society.
Okay, you've given us plenty to think about there. Theo Paphitis, what would you put forward?
Well, I've been listening to this election campaign, quite honestly, and every morning I put the TV on, watch the news, and I keep wondering when someone is going to tell the truth.
Ah.
You know, that word truth.
You want the truth during an election campaign?
I know, and honesty. And I think under corporate governance, for instance, if you're a director of a public company, if you've got to say something, you've got to verify it. You've got to be, and if you don't, or you tell a porcupine, you can get prosecuted. You could even go to jail. It seems like politicians can say whatever they want to say about anything if they think it's going to get your cross on the box by their name.
More true now, do you think, than before?
This has got to be the most negative election I have ever lived through, and I've lived through a few. This has got to be the worst. I don't really understand, because I'm not that bright, what the difference is at the moment between the Tories and the Labour Party, other than a few bits round the side and some mad ideology. Otherwise, they just say whatever they want to say when they want to say it.
Okay, so you're after some truth and some honesty. Tariq, where would you take us?
Well, I agree with what the previous two speakers have said. I mean, this is really an inane, dull election from which the people seem to be excluded. It usually takes place on television. It's dominated by spin and sound bites, and nothing seems to matter in the bulk of the country except in Scotland. I think one interesting thing to remember is that this election probably will be the most important since 1945, because in 1945, the Labour government created a social consensus which lasted a long time and which kept the United Kingdom united. Now you have a situation where it's obvious that a large chunk of the Scots want to go, leave the United Kingdom.
45% voted for that. at the recent referendum.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the opinion polls, if they're accurate, indicate that the Scottish National Party will represent Scotland in Westminster, which will be the first step towards the end of the United Kingdom. And that, I think, is extremely important and is being underplayed. So the next 10 years will be determined not just by the UK, but possibly by an English state and a Scottish state.
I just want to ask you something about something you said a moment ago about the people being excluded from this election. What do you mean in practice, and what would change that? I mean, if they were suddenly included, what would this election campaign suddenly look like?
Well, this election campaign would look like large meetings, hustings, very, very well attended all over the country, if people felt that politicians were giving them different alternatives. But since most of what Labour and Conservatives have to offer is effectively the same, people are bored stiff.
But of course, go back to Francesca's ideological world, which is a fantastic world that we'd all like to live in. The fact is, they've all got the same amount of that dirty word, money to spend when they get into power. So they're working on the same numbers.
Yeah.
Something has to give.
The problem isn't money, the problem is the will to spend the money on the people.
If you haven't got it, you can't spend it.
No, but we can get it. There are loads
go on.
There are loads of amazing things. Apparently, tax evasion and avoidance would, if we clamp down on that, we bring in £120 billion a year. The Robin Hood tax, which would create £20 billion a year. We could even stop going to war, which would save loads of money.
Now, this is where I sense a difference of opinion on at least this side of the table.
Well, you can throw numbers up in the air all the time if you don't know where they're coming from, because no one has actually been able to put a figure on what they would get from any of those. We had the whole non-dom thing. I mean, the reality is every study that's been made about non-doms, and the only reason for the last 200 years each successive government, including Miliband when he was in power, was because it would raise less money than the £90,000 they charge them to live here at the moment. So the numbers don't actually stack up. But let me finish. The numbers don't stack up, but they do get you a tick in the box.
I think what's really interesting, briefly, is to note that Britain's rich have doubled their wealth in the last 10 years under this system, whereas the poor have got poorer. So the system is definitely working for those it was designed for.
Tariq Ali, come in on the original ideas that Francesca put forward. I'm guessing you wouldn't argue with many of them?
No, I would agree with her.
But
on
would
most
you
things.
also doubt whether the money is there to make it happen?
Well, the money is always there when the British state decides to go to war. They never have a problem in finding money to invade Iraq, to bomb Libya, to do other appalling things in the Middle East. No one ever says, oh, we don't have the money. But when it comes to cheap housing for young people today who are excluded from large cities, London is the worst example, most young people cannot find accommodation.
Listen, as a father of 5 kids, and I'm very fortunate, we are very fortunate, but let me tell you, I drive around London regularly. I'm in London most of the time, and I see these huge blocks of apartments and flats going up. What I do know, that every block that Boris Johnson has given permission to put up, nobody can afford that's young or actually lives here.
Which you would agree with, presumably.
Of course.
Because affordable
and so
housing is one of the
public
key issues.
housing, which has been ignored by both sides, Labour and Conservative, is absolutely necessary.
It's really interesting to see the focus on immigrants and on benefits this election. Where the truth is that 97% of benefits goes to people in work. So one way to reduce the benefit bill might be to introduce a living wage for everyone, so the state has to stop subsidising low pay. And I also think the key aim on focusing on issues like welfare and immigrants is to distract us from the real issue here, and that is we have an economic system that doesn't serve the majority of people.
Theo Paphitis, is there anything in the area that we would most associate with you, namely the business world, the small business world, the bigger business world, which you would say, if you changed that now, that would make a huge difference, not just next year, but maybe 5 years hence.
Francesca makes an excellent point about the level of benefits that go to people in work, right? And that always for me is a contradiction in terms, that you actually are working and you're receiving benefits. So very simply, we have to find a way how the taxation, the money that's collected from taxation, is taken by the nanny state and very inefficiently and sometimes recklessly dished out, right? And my point is they should take less tax from businesses, allow businesses to pay a higher rate of wages to allow people not to require benefits, instead of having this nanny state that has all these layers and layers of bureaucracy that takes the money, then gives it back. Pointless.
And that wouldn't make a difference to the balancing of the books that you were raising concerns
It
about
would
earlier
balance
on.
them, but it would exactly do the balance.
Yeah, Tariq Ali.
I don't think businesses are the right organizations to be dependent on for health, education.
I'm talking about wages. I'm talking absolute wages.
No, the
But they
wages
bring wealth
obviously
into
they
the
should
nation.
be. But I don't accept the argument that the reason wages are low is because the government charges too much tax. We know perfectly well in this country that many large corporations pay very little tax at all. The City of London and Wall Street have their favorite places where tax can be avoided, where money is kept, the Virgin Islands for one, the Caymans for another. So many who should be paying.
So why do you think successive governments haven't done that?
Well,
obvious.
Of course many companies don't do that, but quite a lot do, and the government knows they do. And that has not
So why hasn't government dealt with it?
not yet been challenged, because the money was always there previously for a free education, free health system. Now we have
Different
a
levels of
situation
population. The population has grown and continues to grow. Let me just say, basic figures tells us we cannot afford the National Health Service on the level of population growth. Forget about immigration and everything else. Let's talk about internal growth.
But Britain spends less on health than virtually every
Francesca,
European
come in on
country.
that, because that was where we began, and we've only got a little bit of
The
time left.
reason why corporate entities don't pay tax is because they dictate government policy. Corporate donors create the policy in this country. That's true. That's why we're seeing the emergence of TTIP in the EU, which is a trade deal that is incredibly scary. It will allow corporations to sue our governments for billions of pounds in secret courts.
Theo.
This is the ultimate embodiment of corporate dictatorship.
And I'm a great believer in it. No donation should go to political parties. Political parties should be funded by the state, that nobody should receive a donation.
Well, we can agree on that.
There we are.
Well, there you are. We've ended on a note of near harmony. Thank you all very much indeed for coming in. Thanks to Francesca, to Tariq, and to Theo. Good to have you with us.